Some people think a badge makes them untouchable. Rebecca Holloway thought dialing 911 made her God. Rain hammered the roof of the patrol cruiser hard enough to rattle the glass, while red and blue lights smeared across the flooded pavement like spilled paint. I could smell wet asphalt, burned brake pads, and that sharp chemical scent cheap HOA landscaping mulch gives off after a storm. Rebecca stood 20 feet away in a cream-colored trench coat that probably cost more than my truck payment, one hand gripping a black umbrella while the other pointed directly at me like she was ordering an execution. "That's him," she snapped at the officers. "He's trespassing on private community property. Remove him now." The younger deputy grabbed my wrist, not rough, just nervous. His rain-soaked sleeve brushed my jacket, while static crackled from the radio clipped to his shoulder. I didn't resist. Didn't argue either. That was the funny part. Rebecca expected panic. Most people panic when police lights hit their driveway at 10:43 on a Thursday night. But I just stood there beside my father's old porch, rain dripping off the brim of my cap, coffee still warm in my hand. The porch light flickered behind me, reflecting off the puddles pooling around Rebecca's white Lexus SUV parked crooked across my lawn like she owned the county. Maybe she thought she did. Willow Creek Estates had that kind of neighborhood. Perfect trimmed hedges, identical mailboxes, flags folded at regulation angles. The kind of place where people smile at you while measuring your grass with a ruler. I'd only been back in town 3 weeks after 12 years working state investigations in Denver, and already Rebecca had made it her mission to erase me from the neighborhood. First came the violation notices taped to my garage, then the fake complaints about abandoned property, then the towing threats. Every move rehearsed, every smile fake enough to crack under heat. The woman ruled the cul-de-sac like a suburban dictator wrapped in pearl earrings and HOA bylaws. The deputy started guiding me toward the cruiser when the radio on his shoulder suddenly hissed alive. Unit 12, confirm identity on detained. Subject, more static. Rain hammered harder. Possible state credentials associated with Ethan Cole. The deputy slowed. I watched confusion crawl across his face. Rebecca didn't notice. She was too busy performing for the neighbors gathering behind glowing windows. I could practically feel her enjoying the moment. Her little public execution. "I told you he was lying," she said loudly. "These squatters think they can just steal property." Squatter. That word almost made me laugh. My boots were standing on land my father bought in 1984 after 30 years wearing a county sheriff uniform. I learned to throw a baseball in that front yard. Learned to drive in that cracked gravel driveway. Learned exactly what kind of people abuse authority when nobody pushes back. The older officer stepped closer to me, squinting through the rain. Then his eyes widened just a little. Recognition. Small but immediate. "Hold on," he muttered. Rebecca finally noticed the shift in the air. The hesitation. The silence. It spread fast too. 1 second, she was barking orders. The next, nobody was moving. Water rolled down the side of my coffee cup, while thunder rattled somewhere over the hills beyond Willow Creek. Slowly, I reached into my jacket pocket. Rebecca straightened immediately. "See," she snapped. "He's reaching for something." The deputy's flashlight locked onto my hand. I pulled out my wallet, flipped it open. Gold badge. State seal. Internal affairs credentials. The older officer inhaled sharply. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. Rebecca's face drained white enough to match the lightning flashing over the subdivision entrance. I looked directly at her while rainwater dripped off the edge of my badge onto the concrete between us. "Rebecca Holloway," I said calmly. "You just interfered with an active state investigation." The silence after those words felt heavier than the rain. Nobody moved. Not Rebecca. Not the deputies. Not the half-dozen neighbors pretending they were not watching through their living room curtains. Even the radio static seemed quieter somehow. I closed the badge wallet slowly and slipped it back into my jacket while water dripped from the edge of the porch roof onto the cracked concrete below. The older deputy, Sergeant Nolan, according to the patch on his rain jacket, cleared his throat and straightened his posture almost instantly. You could always tell when a cop realized the situation had just flipped upside down. "Investigator Cole," he said carefully, "dispatch did not notify us." "They were not supposed to," I answered. Rebecca finally found her voice again, sharp and panicked this time instead of smug. "This is ridiculous. I do not care what badge he has. He is still violating community regulations." Her heels splashed through puddles as she marched toward us, waving a stack of rain-soaked papers in one hand. The perfume hit me before she did. Expensive floral mixed with wet leather and cold air. This man has ignored every notice sent by the association, she snapped. He has unauthorized vehicles, exterior damage, and failure to comply with community preservation standards. I looked at the papers. Same fake violations she had been taping to my garage for 2 weeks. Different fonts. Different signatures. None legal. But Rebecca had counted on something most people in Willow Creek Estates never questioned. Authority printed on paper looks real enough when fear does the rest. I learned that lesson years ago working fraud investigations in Denver. Most corruption survives because decent people are too exhausted to fight it. The rain eased into a cold drizzle while the neighborhood lights reflected off standing water along the curb. Somewhere down the street, a sprinkler system kept hissing across perfect green grass like nothing had happened. That was Willow Creek in a nutshell. Beautiful from a distance. Rotten underneath. I bought my father's house back from probate 6 months after his funeral. White ranch-style place on the corner lot with an old cedar porch and a detached garage that still smelled like motor oil and sawdust. My father, Daniel Cole, served 28 years with the county sheriff department before cancer hollowed him out one winter at a time. The last real conversation we had happened right there on that porch during a thunderstorm almost identical to this one. He told me something I never forgot. Bad people love neighborhoods where everybody wants things to look peaceful. At the time, I thought he was talking about criminals. Turns out he meant people like Rebecca Holloway. I came back to Willow Creek because Internal Affairs assigned me to a financial corruption case tied to county zoning contracts and fraudulent foreclosures. Quiet assignment. Undercover oversight. No marked units. No announcements. The kind of investigation where you listen more than you speak. The first thing I noticed after moving in was how many houses sat dark and empty despite freshly painted mailboxes and brand new landscaping. Then came the complaints from residents whispered at hardware stores and gas stations. Elderly homeowners losing property rights over unpaid fines they never understood. Contractors billing 3 times market value for repairs nobody saw happen. HOA liens filed faster than parking tickets. Every trail somehow circled back to Rebecca. Same polished smile. Same perfect records. Same impossible authority over everyone around her. The younger deputies shifted awkwardly beside the cruiser while Rebecca kept talking, voice climbing higher with every sentence. You cannot intimidate me with some state badge, she said. I know my rights. Thunder rolled low over the hills beyond the subdivision entrance while I stared at the woman who had spent years weaponizing paperwork against people too tired to fight back. Then I noticed something sticking halfway out of the folder clutched against her chest. County seal. Wrong color ink. My stomach went cold immediately, because that was not just fake HOA paperwork anymore. That was forged state documentation. Rebecca noticed me staring at the document half sticking out of her folder, and for the first time that night, her confidence cracked. Just a flicker, barely visible. But I had spent 12 years interviewing liars under fluorescent lights long enough to recognize the moment panic enters somebody's bloodstream. Her fingers tightened around the papers hard enough to wrinkle the corners. Those are private association records, she snapped. You do not have permission to inspect them. The drizzle turned. Colder, tiny drops ticking against the hood of the patrol cruiser while the deputies exchanged uncomfortable looks beside us. Sergeant Nolan shifted his flashlight toward the paperwork. Ma'am, he said carefully, if state documents are involved, we may need to verify. There are no state documents involved. Rebecca interrupted too fast. Too sharp. Wrong answer. I could already see the seal from 6 feet away. Cheap counterfeit embossing. Wrong spacing around the county lettering. Somebody who had never worked inside government offices would never catch it. But I had spent most of my adult life around official records, warrants, financial subpoenas, and forged paperwork created by people dumb enough to think printers made them invisible. The smell of rain mixed with fresh-cut grass drifting through the subdivision while porch lights flicked on one by one farther down the street. Willow Creek residents always emerged slowly when drama started, like deer stepping out of the woods after hearing a gunshot. Rebecca noticed them too. That was the thing about people like her. Audience mattered. Every conversation became a performance. Every conflict became theater. She straightened her shoulders immediately and forced that polished realtor smile back onto her face. This man has harassed the board for weeks, she announced loudly enough for nearby windows to hear. He refuses compliance, refuses inspections, and has repeatedly threatened legal action against the association. I almost laughed at that one. Threatened legal action. 3 days earlier, she had sent me a certified letter claiming my detached garage violated newly updated architectural standards despite the structure being older than the entire subdivision. 2 days before that, a tow truck mysteriously appeared outside my driveway at 6 in the morning with forged removal authorization. The driver left fast once I asked for permit records. Before that came anonymous complaints about hazardous property conditions filed through county code enforcement using non-existent addresses. Sloppy work, aggressive work, desperate work. Every move Rebecca made felt less like HOA enforcement and more like somebody trying to pressure people out before questions got asked. My father used to call that behavior smoke before the fire. The younger deputy finally spoke up. "Sir," he asked carefully, "are you saying the homeowners association is under investigation?" Rebecca's head snapped toward him so fast her earrings swung sideways. "Absolutely not." Again, too fast. Too emotional. The deputy looked at me instead. I took a slow sip of now lukewarm coffee while rainwater rolled off the brim of my cap. "I am saying somebody in this neighborhood has been filing fraudulent county documents connected to property liens and foreclosure notices." Silence again. Heavy this time. You could hear the hiss of sprinklers from 3 houses down and the distant rumble of thunder moving east across the valley. Rebecca crossed her arms tightly over the folder pressed against her chest. Defensive posture. Closed shoulders. Fight or flight instincts kicking in beneath all the polished suburban perfection. Then came the mistake that told me everything. "You cannot prove any of that," she said quietly. "Not that is not true. Not you are mistaken. You cannot prove it." My stomach tightened. Because innocent people deny accusations. Guilty people challenge evidence. Sergeant Nolan noticed it too. I saw the shift in his eyes immediately. 20 years wearing a badge teaches officers how to hear panic hiding inside confidence. Rebecca realized it a second later. Her jaw clenched. "This conversation is over," she said abruptly before turning toward her Lexus. But when she spun around, the folder slipped from her hand and hit the wet pavement hard enough for papers to scatter across the driveway. White sheets soaked instantly in rainwater while one document slid directly against my boot. County foreclosure authorization. Official seal. My property address. Forged signature from a county clerk who retired 3 years ago. The second that document touched my boot, Rebecca lunged for it like somebody trying to grab a winning lottery ticket before the numbers changed. Too late. Sergeant Nolan bent down first, rain dripping off the brim of his hat onto the soaked paper while his flashlight beam cut across the driveway. I watched his expression flatten the moment he read the county seal. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "where exactly did you get this?" Rebecca froze in the rain. Her perfect smile vanished completely now. No performance left. Just calculation. The neighborhood had gone almost completely silent except for water rushing through the curb drains and the soft ticking sound of rain hitting parked cars. Even the people watching from their windows stopped pretending not to stare. Rebecca tried recovering fast. "That paperwork was submitted by the association legal department," she said. "I do not personally handle filings." Another mistake. Too rehearsed. Too polished. The kind of answer somebody practices before trouble arrives. I crouched down beside Nolan and picked up another soaked page sliding across the pavement. Property maintenance violation authorization. My address again. Same forged county stamp. Same fake processing code. But this one carried something even worse. My father's name. Daniel Cole. Deceased homeowner transfer authorization. The air suddenly felt colder against my skin despite the humidity hanging over Willow Creek. There are certain things people should never touch. Family graves. Military records. Dead parents. Rebecca Holloway had managed all 3 kinds of disrespect wrapped into one folder. I stood slowly while water dripped from the papers onto the concrete. "Interesting," I said quietly. "My father died 18 months ago." Rebecca said nothing. "And according to county probate records," I continued, "this transfer authorization was supposedly signed 8 months after his funeral." The younger deputy looked at Rebecca like he was seeing her for the first time. The smell of wet cedar from my porch mixed with ozone rolling in from another thunderstorm building over the valley hills. Rebecca crossed her arms tighter, defensive again. But now her eyes kept darting toward the Lexus parked beside the curb. Distance calculations, exit routes, panic disguised as annoyance. I had seen that look in embezzlers, corrupt contractors, and fake charity directors right before warrants landed on their desks. Sergeant Nolan handed me the paperwork. Carefully. "Investigator Cole," he asked quietly, "is this connected to your case?" I looked down at the soaked documents in my hand, then at the rows of perfect houses stretching through Willow Creek estates under pale streetlights and rain. Every mailbox painted identical black, every lawn trimmed to exact height, every porch glowing warm and safe from the outside. The illusion of order. That was Rebecca's real product. Not neighborhood safety, not property values. Control. Fear wrapped in landscaping regulations and legal jargon. 3 months ago, I said, an elderly couple 2 blocks over lost their house after the association filed emergency maintenance liens worth $98,000. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. Last month, another homeowner signed over partial land rights after receiving forged county demolition notices. Sergeant Nolan's jaw tightened. And now, I said, lifting the soaked foreclosure paperwork slightly, somebody attempted to fraudulently remove me from property legally transferred through probate. Rebecca suddenly laughed. Loud. Forced. The sound bounced strangely through the wet subdivision. "This is absurd," she snapped. "You think I forged county documents myself?" I stared at her for a long moment while thunder rolled low across the mountains. "No," I answered calmly. "I think you got comfortable." That one landed harder than yelling ever could. Her face tightened instantly. Because people like Rebecca survive by convincing themselves they are untouchable. They stop hiding. Stop checking details. Stop imagining consequences. Somewhere nearby, a garage door rumbled open before immediately closing again once whoever lived there realized police were still outside. Willow Creek residents loved watching disaster as long as it happened to somebody else. Then Rebecca made the mistake that finally confirmed everything for me. She looked directly at Sergeant Nolan and said, "Call Chief Mercer. He knows who I am." The moment those words left her mouth, the older deputy's entire expression changed. Not fear. Disappointment. Slow, exhausted disappointment. Because now it was no longer just forged paperwork. Now political. Connections had entered the room too. The rain finally stopped around midnight, but the neighborhood still smelled soaked and electric, like wet concrete after a lightning strike. Rebecca stood motionless beside her Lexus while Sergeant Nolan stared at her with the kind of expression cops get when a simple disturbance call suddenly turns into paperwork that ruins careers. The younger deputy shifted nervously beside the cruiser, glancing between Rebecca and me like he was trying to figure out how the entire situation had flipped upside down in less than 10 minutes. Rebecca recovered first. People like her always do. Her shoulders straightened, chin lifted slightly. Voice calm again. Artificial calm. "Chief Mercer can explain all of this confusion," she said smoothly while brushing rainwater off her sleeve. "Our association works closely with county leadership." County leadership. Another interesting phrase. Not law enforcement. Not legal counsel. Leadership. Influence. That told me more than she realized. Sergeant Nolan rubbed a hand across his jaw. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "forged county documents are not confusion." Rebecca ignored him completely and looked directly at me instead. There was no friendliness left now. No fake suburban charm. Just cold calculation hiding behind expensive makeup and pearl earrings. "You moved here under false pretenses," she said quietly. "You never disclosed your position." I almost smiled at that. "I bought my father's house," I answered. "I am not required to ask permission." The wet wind carried the smell of pine trees down from the hills beyond Willow Creek while porch lights flickered across the subdivision like nervous eyes opening in the dark. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once before going silent again. Rebecca folded her arms tighter around herself. "You have been spying on this community." There it was. Not denying fraud. Not denying forged records. Her real concern finally surfaced. Exposure. The younger deputy frowned. "Ma'am, if there is an active investigation, there should not be," Rebecca snapped sharply. Silence again. Heavy enough to feel. Sergeant Nolan slowly looked toward me. I could practically see the pieces connecting inside his head now. Political pressure. Fake documents. Aggressive HOA foreclosures. Somebody higher up protecting it all. The same pattern I had been tracing for months through financial records and county filings. My assignment originally started 40 miles north involving fraudulent redevelopment contracts. Then the names began overlapping. Contractors tied to Willow Creek. Shell companies registered through HOA management firms. Elderly homeowners pressured into forced sales after mysterious code violations appeared overnight. Every trail circled back here eventually. Back to Rebecca Holloway and the smiling little empire she built behind decorative entrance signs and community newsletters. She stepped closer toward me across the wet driveway, heels clicking softly against the concrete. "You have no idea who you are dealing with," she whispered. I could smell expensive perfume mixed with rainwater and damp leather. Fear hid underneath it now, sharp and bitter. "Actually," I said quietly, "I finally do." Her eyes narrowed instantly. She realized then that this was never random, never personal neighborhood drama. She had not targeted some quiet homeowner who happened to fight back. She had stepped directly into an investigation already building around her long before I moved into my father's house. The realization hit her visibly. Tiny changes, faster breathing, tension in her jaw. The moment predators realize they are standing in somebody else's trap. Sergeant Nolan's radio suddenly crackled again through the damp night air. "Supervisor en route," dispatch announced. "Estimated arrival 5 minutes." Rebecca immediately relaxed just a little. Not because she felt innocent, because she expected rescue. That told me everything I needed to know about Chief Mercer before I even met him. Corruption leaves fingerprints on behavior long before it leaves fingerprints on evidence. Rebecca turned toward Nolan with a small, confident smile returning to her lips. "See," she said softly, "this whole misunderstanding is about to disappear." I looked past her toward the subdivision entrance glowing under yellow streetlights and felt something cold settle in my stomach. Because if Chief Mercer really was connected to this operation, then tonight had just become a lot more dangerous politically than anybody standing in that driveway realized. The first thing I noticed about Chief Mercer was the smell of cigar smoke clinging to his rain jacket before he even stepped out of the black county SUV. Not fresh smoke either. Old smoke soaked deep into fabric from years of long nights and bad decisions. His headlights swept across the subdivision entrance before cutting off, leaving the whole street washed in pale yellow porch lights and wet reflections shimmering on the pavement. Rebecca smiled the second she saw him. Not relieved, triumphant, like a gambler watching the dealer pull a card she already paid for. Chief Mercer climbed out slowly, broad shoulders, silver hair slicked back from the rain, one hand resting casually near his duty belt while he scanned the scene. Patrol cruiser. Scattered paperwork. Neighbors peeking through blinds. Me standing on my father's driveway holding forged county documents. His eyes paused on the badge clipped inside my jacket pocket. Just 1 second. But that second told me he recognized exactly who I was before anybody spoke. "Evening," Mercer said calmly. Deep voice. Controlled. The kind seasoned politicians trust because it sounds reassuring even when it should not. Sergeant Nolan stepped forward immediately. "Chief, we may have an issue involving fraudulent county filings tied to the Homeowners Association." Rebecca cut in before he finished. "This man has been harassing residents and conducting unauthorized surveillance." Mercer never looked at her. He kept his eyes on me the entire time. "Investigator Cole," he said quietly. "Interesting place to spend your evening." Cold wind pushed through the subdivision carrying the smell of wet pine and soaked mulch while thunder rolled somewhere farther out in the valley. I folded the damp foreclosure papers carefully and handed them toward Mercer. Interesting paperwork, too. He took the documents without expression. Experienced hands. Calm hands. But I noticed his thumb stop briefly against the forged county seal. Recognition again. Not surprise. Recognition. Rebecca saw it too. Her confidence flickered for half a second before she forced another smile. "Chief Mercer understands how these misunderstandings happen," she said quickly. "The association only wants to preserve community standards." Mercer stayed silent while reading the papers under the glow of the patrol cruiser headlights. The younger deputy shifted nervously beside Nolan. Nobody seemed comfortable breathing anymore. Finally, Mercer looked up at Rebecca. "Where did these forms come from?" Her answer came instantly. Too instantly. "Association legal processing." Mercer nodded once. Slow. Thoughtful. "Name of the attorney?" Silence. Tiny pause. Barely noticeable. But enough. Rebecca crossed her arms again. I would need to check records. Another mistake. I could practically hear the investigation tightening around her with every sentence. Mercer handed the documents back to me carefully. Walk with me, he said. We moved a few feet down the driveway away from the others while rainwater dripped steadily from the gutters above the porch. The cedar boards beneath my boots creaked softly, same way they used to when my father paced during late-night calls from the sheriff department. Mercer lowered his voice. You should have informed me before coming into my county. There it was. Territorial language. Not concern about fraud. Not concern about forged foreclosures targeting residents. His concern was jurisdiction. Control. I stared at him for a long moment. Funny, I said quietly. I was about to say the same thing about the association. His jaw tightened just slightly. Enough to confirm what I already suspected. Chief Mercer knew exactly what Willow Creek had become. Maybe not every detail. Maybe not every forged signature or fake lien. But he knew enough. The dangerous part about corruption is that it rarely starts with criminals. Usually it starts with decent people deciding to ignore one small thing because fixing it feels inconvenient. Then the small things grow teeth. Mercer glanced back toward Rebecca standing beside her Lexus under the streetlight, still trying to look composed while neighbors watched from glowing windows all around the subdivision. You are making powerful enemies here, he said quietly. I looked at the forged foreclosure papers still damp in my hand. My dead father's name printed beside fake county authorization stamps. No, I answered. They made me one first. Then Mercer's radio crackled sharply against his shoulder. Dispatch voice. Tight. Urgent. Chief, Financial Crimes Division just issued a warrant request connected to Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. Rebecca's face went completely white. For a second, nobody in Willow Creek Estates moved at all. The only sound was the soft hiss of rainwater draining into the storm gutters and the crackle of Chief Mercer's radio, still hanging in the cold night air. Rebecca looked like somebody had pulled the ground out from under her heels. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Just shallow breaths fogging in the damp air. Mercer grabbed the radio from his shoulder immediately. Repeat that dispatch. Static burst through the speaker. Financial Crimes Division confirmed probable cause tied to fraudulent foreclosure filings and contractor laundering connected to Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. State warrant package is being finalized now. The younger deputy stared directly at Rebecca. No confusion left anymore. Just disbelief. The kind that hits when authority suddenly stops protecting somebody. Rebecca recovered fast, but not cleanly this time. Panic leaked through every movement. This is insane, she snapped while stepping backward toward her Lexus. You cannot seriously be entertaining this garbage. Garbage. Funny word considering half the evidence against her came from documents she accidentally dropped into a puddle 10 minutes earlier. Chief Mercer lowered the radio slowly and looked at her with tired eyes. Not surprised eyes. Tired ones. Like a man watching consequences finally catch up to something he ignored too long. Rebecca, he said quietly. Tell me there is an explanation. Her jaw tightened instantly. You know exactly how this county works, she hissed. Wrong answer again. Sergeant Nolan exhaled heavily beside the cruiser while the younger deputy avoided eye contact. Completely. The smell of wet asphalt mixed with engine heat drifting from the patrol vehicles parked along the curb. More porch lights flicked on throughout the subdivision now. Curtains moving. Front doors cracking open slightly. Willow Creek residents could sense blood in the water. Rebecca pointed directly at me, rainwater dripping from the sleeve of her trench coat. He came into this neighborhood looking for problems. I shook my head slowly. No, I came home. That line landed harder than I expected. Maybe because it was true. My father's porch creaked beneath my boots while cold wind pushed through the street, carrying the smell of soaked pine from the hills above town. I suddenly remembered being 12 years old sitting on those same porch steps while my father cleaned mud off his sheriff boots after flood rescues down by the river. He used to say the scariest criminals were the ones who convinced themselves they were helping people. Rebecca Holloway absolutely believed she was helping Willow Creek. That was the dangerous part. She wrapped greed inside neighborhood standards and sold fear as protection. Chief Mercer finally looked back toward me. How deep does this go? I held the soaked foreclosure papers up slightly. 17 fraudulent liens so far. 6 forced property transfers. 3 shell contractors tied to county redevelopment funds. Rebecca laughed again, but this time it sounded cracked around the edges. You cannot prove I signed anything. Actually, I answered calmly. You already did. Her face froze. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. Opened one video file. Security footage from earlier that week. Timestamp glowing in the corner. Rebecca standing beside my mailbox at 1:14 in the morning using copied keys to remove county correspondence before replacing it with forged violation notices. Infrared footage. Crystal clear. Sergeant Nolan muttered something under his breath while the younger deputy stared at the screen wide-eyed. Rebecca took another step backward. That is illegal surveillance. No, I said quietly. That is my front porch camera. The wind gusted suddenly hard enough to shake water loose from the oak tree hanging over the driveway. Rebecca's polished composure finally shattered completely. You set me up. Her voice cracked this time. Real fear now. Real understanding. I slipped the phone back into my pocket slowly. No, I answered. I gave you chances to stop. Chief Mercer rubbed both hands across his face before looking towards Sergeant Nolan. The older deputy already understood. You could see it in his posture. The slow resignation of a man realizing the next few hours were about to become county history. Then another set of headlights turned into Willow Creek Estates from the main road. Dark SUVs. State vehicles. No neighborhood logo stickers. No decorative golf carts. Just cold government steel reflecting against wet pavement. Financial Crimes Division had arrived. The black SUVs rolled into Willow Creek slow and silent, tires hissing across wet pavement while amber reflections shimmered beneath the streetlights. No sirens. No drama. Real investigators never needed theatrics. The first vehicle stopped beside the patrol cruiser, and 3 financial crimes agents stepped out wearing dark rain jackets stamped with state insignias that caught the light every time they moved. Rebecca's breathing changed immediately. Faster now. Uneven. She looked around the subdivision like she expected somebody to step forward and stop all of this from happening. Nobody did. The neighbors stayed frozen on porches and behind windows, watching their untouchable HOA queen suddenly look very small under the yellow glow of the streetlights. One of the agents, a tall woman named Alvarez, walked directly toward me carrying a waterproof evidence case tucked under one arm. Investigator Cole, she said calmly. We finally got judicial approval 30 minutes ago. She glanced toward Rebecca without expression. County Records Office cooperated after we traced the duplicate filing stamps. Rebecca shook her head immediately. This is harassment. Alvarez ignored her completely and opened the evidence case against the hood of the SUV. Inside sat stacks of printed bank transfers, contractor invoices, property liens, and financial summaries clipped with colored evidence tabs. The smell of wet paper and engine heat drifted through the air while the subdivision sat silent around us. Alvarez handed one folder to Chief Mercer first. 37 unauthorized contractor payments routed through association maintenance accounts. Another folder. 3 shell companies registered to a holding corporation tied to Rebecca Holloway's brokerage office. Another folder. Multiple fraudulent foreclosure attempts against elderly homeowners with altered county processing records. Every page felt heavier than the rain-soaked foreclosure document still sitting in my hand. Rebecca stared at the evidence like she physically could not process what she was seeing. Those accounts were approved by the board, she whispered weakly. Alvarez finally looked directly at her. The board members already gave statements. That one hit hard. Rebecca's eyes widened. Fear finally stripped away the last pieces of arrogance she had been wearing all night. No, she said quietly. They would never. One of them brought us the ledger copies personally. Alvarez interrupted. Silence swallowed the street again. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled beyond the mountains while cold wind pushed wet leaves across the curb. I watched Rebecca's posture collapse inch by inch. Shoulders sagging, jaw trembling slightly. She realized the protection around her had already started breaking apart before tonight even happened. That was the thing corrupt people never understand. Fear keeps systems alive right up until the first person finally talks. Then everybody starts talking. Chief Mercer closed the evidence folder slowly and looked older than he had 20 minutes earlier. Rebecca, he said quietly, tell me you did not forge county foreclosure filings. She looked at him like a drowning person searching for something solid to grab onto. I was protecting property values, she whispered. Wrong answer. Again. Not denial. Just justification. The smell of rain faded beneath the sharper scent of wet engine metal and soaked asphalt, while financial crimes agents began quietly photographing the scattered paperwork around my driveway. One agent collected the forged transfer forms using plastic sleeves while another documented Rebecca's statements through a body microphone clipped near his collar. Professional. Calm. Methodical. No shouting. No chaos. Real consequences usually arrive quietly. Rebecca suddenly looked directly at me again. Her mascara had started running slightly beneath her eyes from the rain, but the anger was still there underneath the panic. You planned this, she said. I shook my head slowly. No, you built it yourself. Alvarez stepped beside Rebecca then. Rebecca Holloway, she said calmly, you are being detained pending charges related to fraud, falsified county filings, unlawful foreclosure activity, and financial misconduct connected to Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. The words settled over the neighborhood like cold fog. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The only sound came from the soft metallic click of handcuffs closing beneath the streetlights. Rebecca closed her eyes briefly the moment the cuffs locked around her wrists. Not rage anymore. Not authority. Just reality finally arriving all at once. Across the street, one of the residents quietly lowered an American flag that had been left out in the rain all evening, while financial crimes agents escorted Rebecca past the subdivision fountain she spent years bragging about at HOA meetings. Water trickled softly through the stone basin, while camera flashes reflected across the wet concrete. The Queen of Willow Creek Estates walked past her own neighborhood entrance in handcuffs, while the people she spent years controlling watched in complete silence. 3 months later, Willow Creek Estates looked like a completely different neighborhood. Funny how fast perfection fades once people stop being afraid. The giant decorative HOA sign at the subdivision entrance was gone now, hauled away on a flatbed truck after the state froze association assets during the investigation. All that remained was a patch of dead grass and 4 empty bolt holes in the concrete where Rebecca's little kingdom used to announce itself to the world. The neighborhood felt quieter without it. Real quieter. Not the fake silence Willow Creek used to have where everybody whispered behind closed blinds. Pretending everything was fine. I sat on my father's porch one cold October morning with a mug of black coffee warming my hands while sunlight pushed through the pine trees lining the street. The air smelled like fresh cedar and damp leaves instead of wet asphalt and panic. Somewhere nearby, somebody was using a lawn mower for the first time in weeks without worrying about violation notices taped to their mailbox afterward. Funny thing about freedom. You notice the small sounds first. Kids riding bicycles again. Neighbors talking in driveways. Garage doors staying open past sunset. Life returning slowly after years of tension sitting on everybody's shoulders like invisible weight. Financial Crimes Division ended up uncovering almost $4 million in fraudulent transfers tied to Willow Creek Estates over 6 years. Fake maintenance contracts. Inflated landscaping invoices. Foreclosure pressure campaigns targeting retired homeowners living on fixed incomes. Rebecca and 3 board members used shell companies to route association money through contractor accounts before funneling it back into private real estate investments. Even worse, they manipulated county code complaints to force down property values before quietly buying homes through intermediaries. Chief Mercer retired 2 weeks after the investigation became public, officially for health reasons. Unofficially because the county commissioners realized the story was becoming impossible to contain. Sergeant Nolan testified voluntarily during the hearings. That mattered more than most people understood. Good cops fixing bad systems rarely make headlines, but they are usually the reason justice happens at all. Rebecca Holloway took a plea agreement after forensic accountants tied her directly to forged foreclosure filings, including the papers carrying my father's name. I still remember the exact moment the prosecutor slid those documents across the courtroom table during preliminary hearings. The room went completely silent except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Rebecca never looked at me once. Not entering court. Not leaving either. By then the arrogance was gone. All that remained was exhaustion and consequences. The residents of Willow Creek dissolved the Homeowners Association by unanimous vote 37 days after the arrests. Turns out most people never wanted a suburban dictator measuring grass height and threatening foreclosures in the first place. They just got used to being intimidated. That is how corruption survives almost everywhere. Not through power, through exhaustion, through decent people convincing themselves speaking up is not worth the trouble. I picked up my father's old sheriff coffee mug from the porch rail beside me and ran my thumb along the chipped handle while cold wind drifted through the trees. The garage still smelled faintly like motor oil and sawdust from all the years he spent rebuilding engines out there on weekends. Sometimes late at night, I still catch myself expecting to hear his boots crossing the porch behind me. The cedar boards creaked softly under my chair while morning sunlight spread across the empty street where police cruisers once flooded the pavement red and blue. Peaceful now. Finally real this time. Across the road, an elderly couple watered flowers